Okay, back and discussing Spore, the seed, this micro business that will grow local economies and allow communities to have more sovereignty in this modern day. Spoke about how this micro business, this tool, will offer some basic functions, and then it will offer services which will enable people to trade. And then I was talking about how it will enable these hyphal networks, or these networks, to grow, that will focus on developing different industries, and tasks will be met where local currency will be earned, and it will grow to a point and reach a certain capacity, each of these networks, where the data has a certain saturation, it has a certain capacity which the hardware will be able to carry, but also where the community who are developing it, or the hyphal network, reaches a point where it needs help, essentially. So going back to farming, community might collect all the data they need, or the farmers might, and then that data reaches a point that it sends out a call, essentially, a call for help, a call for support, and a call to manage that data and to assist that community to develop their agriculture into more viable form and more profitable for them, so that they are able to trade beyond their bounds. Fact of the matter is, as things stand, there is more perceived value in developed countries and less perceived value in developing countries. So how to bring that bridge to, how to allow more regular sharing and more regular trade in the system, is to say that we're in a position where around the world, in most countries, there are organizations, local ones, international ones, of people who are very willing and to make change and to support communities, and many of these development communities or businesses or social businesses that are running are focusing just in their own industries or in their own areas, have a certain capacity to assist, but to get into some of these areas, to try to access them, is difficult, because it requires such a setup. And just to collect the data that our community, we're talking about this example of a community that's already collected the data. They're already there. They're already presenting their data, which is theirs. They've earned it. They have the ownership of it. But they're able to then, once they've reached the level, they can then offer that. And we would have what's called the grandparents. So the whole community that's around one Spore are the parents of it, you could say. They are parenting it, and they're parenting the growth of the different hyphal networks and ideal needs as industries. And the grandparents are the organizations, the businesses, the individuals also, who are willing to volunteer, to gift, to donate, to also see an opportunity. We're in a time in a lot of countries where it's very trendy to have a product that's well packaged, and it has a social responsibility, and it's grown organically and ethically, and fair trade, and all these things. This is some of the best products that are around in the world. And what Haifa Culture does through this process is it offers a delivery system where that business can actually increase its potential to assist by being a grandparent and saying, well, we'll support this industry by just engaging with it in business. So the community puts up their data for tender, and a small business, let's say in Norway, is like, we'll take it on because we identified that they have a great growing conditions that are good for a bunch of crops, let's say. And they say, okay, we'll commit, so this is in their negotiation with the community, they say, we'll commit X amount of admin hours per month, we'll facilitate volunteers and, let's say, apprentices who've completed their education in Norway and want to go and volunteer in another country where they can also earn their local currency and be a part of the growth of that agriculture Haifa network taking the next step. They will manage the product development, distribution, the adding of value to the raw materials essentially that are grown locally, and create the environment for that community to receive more value from what they can grow essentially. And they would do this in a way which would increase the value of the local currency in that community, by offering, whether it's their services or also actual goods that can increase the value for that area. So that relationship and how that plays out will enable that community to develop further and become more anchored and be able to engage internationally and locally increase its value and the value of its own hype, let's call it hype, it's the local currency for that area, hype, geo-specific to whichever area that spore is in. And you would see the same with education, you would see the same with health. You have so many willing people around the world, especially in developed countries, where they're either coming from good education or not. They're just willing people who see that the world is not well and there's a need for help. And by making different areas of the world that are maybe more remote and more isolated or have a lack of an economy, by bringing that economy up, the locals are more attracted to be there. They have less reliance on going to look for a false currency. But what most people are going to say is, well, how are you going to buy stuff? How is this going to work when fixed assets and then, if you want to build a processing center, you're going to need stainless steel and the stuff costs money and things always cost money. And the answer is that this system isn't that way or this way. It's about saying, how do we grow that economy and still work with the old system so that there's an exchange? So the answer to that is something called SEPTA, or a teller. And SEPTA in the mycelium are these baffles that go along each tube of Haifa that grows. And these are structural support but they're also filters in this mycelium network. And in terms of our Haifa Culture project, in terms of this plan, the SEPTA teller is a trading platform. It's a teller that enables multi-currency transactions to be exchanged. So the community that makes the exchange with the Norwegian company who needs to donate fixed assets, and they need to be able to make exchanges, there can be a range of currencies that's agreed upon. So when it comes down to selling their produce, they might say, we'll take, the community might say, we'll take, 60% fiat currency. Let's say it's, I don't know, South African rands. They'll take 60% South African rands, and they'll take 40% of their local currency. It could be divided into a number of different categories, especially because the scepter tiller doesn't only relate to trading between the parents and the grandparents, it relates to even trading between the parents. So two people might trade between each other and say, well, the cost of this good or service is going to be 100%, and the guy says, or the woman says to the man, oh, I offer to pay you 20% in chickens, and I'll offer to pay you 20% in our local hype currency, and I'll pay you the rest of the balance in the South African rands. What that means is that we can use fiat currency just for when we need it, for the cost of goods, for the least that it's needed, and then grow these other economies by doing that. The other advantage, major advantage between the parents and the grandparents in exchanging like this is that money and the administration of money is challenging, as anyone in development knows. Getting a gift from A to B generally results in B getting a lot less, because there's actually A 0.1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 between A and B. So by being able to gift it directly, you're able to see that gift into the other economy. You see that, let's say the Norwegian company gives, let's say the Spores in South Africa, gives us this South African community 100,000 rand worth of development money in hardware, in fixed assets. But they're actually willing to gift it to them, but they're willing to invest in the project to the point that they're willing to put that 100,000 into hype. So they've essentially loaned that community 100,000 worth of hype, because that company knows that they'll easily get that 100,000 back in terms of value of product as it gets back to them for them to resell. So they're able to gift that freely, but know that they will get that return back, and that by doing that, it means that that local community have the value of 100,000 hype injected into the local economy. So when people are working in that community to pay that back, they're actually earning that same hype. So this work and the development of the detail of this and the specifics are the work of the great-grandparents. So if you imagine the spore and the parents around it, and then these great-grandparents as businesses and organizations around that, what surrounds all of it are these great-grandparents, which you could also call advisors, you could call architects, you could call designers, and this is where we're at now. This is where this project is at now. It's calling these people, you people, who maybe at the fringe of your own industry, whatever it is, you may have developed a deeper understanding of your industry in the world and are doing really amazing things already to develop that industry. And in the context of this framework, of this strategy of delivery, you would be designing those protocols of growth, those Hyphal network protocols that enable that community to grow, those tasks you'd be designing, that you'd be working on economists like Charles Eisenstein, who has an amazing take on he calls it sacred economics, in allowing these sort of communities to grow, but some of the fundamental premises are economics. And the economic model would need to work so well that it would be seamless, and you pay Rome what you need to pay Rome. The amount of fiat currency that you use, taxman, he must get his money for that. But the money that isn't used, the local money that's sovereign to that spore, must stay with that spore, and they may have their own form of localized tax. I think Charles talks about how most money doesn't degrade. Everything else in the world degrades. It has a depreciation value, and by factoring that into a system, you reduce the ability for hoarding, and money moves faster in circulation. It gets worked, it gets used, it's less stagnant. Because if you hold it, it breaks down, it erodes. So I feel that's a really important aspect to the story, to enable these communities to grow. The other most important sort of ideal need that will be important to grow these ideal networks is governance. Because in our current matrix that we're living in, the governance or the governments that are dictating laws and pretty much everything for people, in fact, are just corporations. They're just businesses trying to do their best. They're existing as a product of history with their own psychologies and their own relationships. They're where they are, and to attempt to try to change them and to get them to understand or to be a part of an evolutionary process is quite counterproductive. But to be able to respect them and allow them their space, but also to be able to meet them at a place is of fundamental importance, because with a project or a system like hyperculture, eventually, once it works its way through the grassroots and below the grassroots as mycelium works, it will reach a capacity